One of the many hidden consequences of social distancing measures is a rise in the use of pornography. What does that indicate about us? Why are we turning to pornography? What job is porn doing in our lives?
A lot more porn.
That's how much pornography nearly 1 in 5 Americans say they have watched since the pandemic started, according to preliminary findings from the Kinsey Institute.
2 hours is how much porn the average person reports watching in the last 2 weeks.
In many regions, spikes in use have occurred immediately after social distancing measures have been implemented. Pornhub saw an 18% jump over normal numbers after making its premium content free for 30 days for people who agree to stay at home and wash their hands frequently. I mean, frankly, that should be standard for Pornhub users.
And overall, 24% is the highest traffic spike Pornhub reported in 2020.
Obviously, this is not about a judgment of pornography. Myself, I really try to stay clear of pornography. I look at my own use of pornography as an indication that I'm not feeling connected or particularly well. But I know there are lots and lots of different opinions on pornography. And if you're watching this video, that means you've got a device in your hand right now that you could be using for pornography. So well done for at least watching a video about porn. What I'm interested in are what are the emotional conditions that make a rise in porn use on a personal and social level likely, and what is it that we're missing? Gabor Mate, the brilliant doctor, and he's not a psychologist or psychiatrist, he's just what he calls himself as a family doctor, but he's written some brilliant books on addiction, most famously in the realm of Hungry Ghost. He's been a guest on Under the Skin several times, and he says, when looking at addiction, look at what it does right for a person. Look at what that habit is doing correctly for a person. So it's pretty clear that what the job pornography does for a lot of people is makes us feel connected, makes us feel distracted. And more spiritual writers, people that more directly and explicitly embrace a spiritual perspective, talk about the idea of channeling. I'm speaking specifically about Michael Singer, also a guest on Under the Skin, who, when I talked to him some time ago about my own use of pornography, he says what someone feels when they sit there addicted to pornography is the feeling of chi, Shakti. You understand they're feeling energy. The reason they're feeling it is because they've opened. It's something in their mind that has opened. I like this idea that it awakens a sort of force of energy. If you can for a moment extract your analysis and understanding of porn from all of the kind of cadence and inflection of pornography, the shame around it, whether you think it's right or wrong, liberating or appalling, what's actually happening is you're staring, in the instances we're discussing, at a screen and you're creating an energetic state. I approach things mostly from a perspective of addiction, having been addicted to a lot of things in my life. And like when you take chemical dependency out of the picture, you realize that you can generate and create your own narcotics in your body, that you can change your mood, distract yourself. There's nothing inherently wrong, one could argue, with pornography. But stimulating and synthesizing certain conditions within yourself in order to soothe, distract, control yourself, for me it starts to feel, well, that you're living in a kind of abstract reality. What is the reality you're referring to? Of course, there's sort of conjugal activity, but there's also connection, the idea of connection and intimacy. I suppose you could understand what it is you're lacking, not only by the act of looking at pornography itself, but also the type of pornography you're looking at.
And since the start of the pandemic, 18.5 million searches have included the word corona on Pornhub. 11.8 million have included quarantine.
The fact that people are trying to accommodate an understanding of the current pandemic into their use of pornography is interesting, isn't it? It's a weird way to metastasize or metabolize the experience. I think that next time I have the urge to look at pornography, what I want to do instead is think, right, can you do like a breathing exercise? But it's very difficult, isn't it, when you feel that the need to, whether it's look at pornography or eat chocolate or use drugs or drink, to sort of sit with the feeling, to wait and go, right, what happens? One time, like when I didn't want to look at pornography, me and a friend talked about, yeah, let's not look at pornography then. I goes, next time I want to look at pornography, I'll reach out to you. And I goes, right, I'm thinking about looking at pornography now. And he said, by text, I don't know what it is you're feeling, but I know it won't be improved by looking at pornography. And like that sort of, even that was enough to sort of interrupt the pattern of thinking that leads me to use pornography. I suppose actually what you ought to rely on is your own code. If you look at pornography and you just go, I like it, I absolutely love looking at pornography, it's an absolute joy, it's bliss for me, then that's not a problem, is it? But if you look at pornography and you think, well, I don't feel great that I did that, or I'm doing that too much, or I'd rather not do that at all, then that's when you have to start considering solutions. And to get to solutions, you have to understand the job that it's doing for you.
6.2%. That's how much Pornhub says US traffic increased on August 24th last year when Zoom experienced a 6-hour outage.
Back to what Michael Singer said. He comments that we're sort of trying to channel energy, and I find this a very interesting angle to investigate if you want to understand not only your own porn use, but any obsessive behavior. Your mind has the ability to close up, like blinds close. When it closes, energy can't flow because it's closed, like a cloud across the sun. You don't see the light, but it's still there. You get dark, you get depressed, you get tired. When something is happening in front of you that opens you up, such as seeing your partner that you haven't seen for years, or a lottery win, or looking at pornography, I don't care, he says. Whatever it is that opens you up will be specific because of the patterns you've built in your head. The different things that would disgust one person would turn someone else on. I'm not judging, he says. I'm just saying that's what psychology is. Psychology is about the patterns that you store in your mind that create inclinations. The reason that channeling idea stuck with me is because when I think about the experience of pornography, I recognize that it is an attempt to change the way I feel, to generate a particular feeling, to access a kind of transcendence. Now, I know some of you think, oh, you think too much, you talk too much, you do everything too much. But just take a moment to connect with the person that you actually are in those moments, if it applies to you. If you do anything you don't want to do, if you can't control it when you want to eat or watch porn or something, like if you try to bring awareness to that moment, you will learn something about yourself.
3.5 million new subscribers is how many new people signed up for adult content site OnlyFans in March.
OnlyFans is a relatively new phenomena, a site that works in harmony with social media sites and grants you access, which I think is presumed to be sexually explicit, although I'm sure there's more to it than that, and I've not used the platform, so I don't know for sure. You could look at it as like, oh, that's entrepreneurial and it gives people the opportunity to generate revenue and pay for staff and all of that. But I suppose what I think is interesting is the ongoing commodification of all relationships and how this lockdown has facilitated that. It's not like a criticism of content providers on OnlyFans. How is that different from what I'm doing, other than my assumption, which may be incorrect, that it's a kind of sexual thing? I'm not a prudish person. I don't care about things like that. What I think is it's an interesting way of understanding an unmet need for connection that is being commodified. It's perhaps not more serious than us commodifying joy for our consumption of soft drinks or adventure through the purchase of an automobile. It belongs in the same milieu, though.
Porn consumption is through the roof. In March, OnlyFans, a site that allows subscribers to directly message and pay their favorite performers, is getting around 200,000 new users per day.
Yeah, what is motivating that? I feel like with the OnlyFans, although again, this is a critique that I'm offering without having used the product, is it must be a search for connection. In fact, it stands to reason that any behavior that we exhibit in a modern context, particularly a technological one in this instance, must be undergirded by a primal and indigenous behavior, because otherwise it wouldn't be there. You can't create, even if you do create new behaviors, it is resourced from an indigenous energy somewhere. It has a biochemical resource. And isn't culture really about the direction of those resources? Direct hatred this way, direct loyalty and love this way, direct your passion and will in these directions. What I'm interested in understanding, distilling, if as it were, is the original energies, because we perhaps have more choice than we realize about how we direct them. In fact, that's, I suppose, what the spiritual life is the ability to be present with these forces and resources. Think for a moment about pantheism. You know, Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the god of love. These energies are present in you. Otherwise, where else could they be? Where else could they be relevant? This energy of eros, erotica, sexuality, it can be catered for in this way, but it's somewhat dystopic because in a sense it's like you know in the Matrix when it uses the brilliant and famous image of the battery, well, increasingly this becomes our reality. We live in a cellular life and we import the fluids and stimulants that we require through screens and through synthesized foods. And something in us roars and screams and craves a return to the natural. And if we have to mine it out of ourselves through masturbation, if that's the closest we can get, then we'll take it.
Evelyn Stone's income comes directly from her fans, and the pandemic is proving that there's money to be made outside of just people going at it on camera.
People on my site are more like, what are you doing during quarantine? You know, show me a video of you making your coffee.
Really?
Yeah, like
They want to see you make coffee.
If people want to see people make a cup of coffee and stuff, that is, I suppose, an indication of a kind of total loss of, one, a loss of intimacy, and two, an inability to be alone. And I really kind of identify with that. I don't live in a condition where I would be alone so much these days, but I know that when I lived a different type of lifestyle, like a lot of my conduct was about, I don't want to be alone. I want to feel wanted. I want to feel important. I want to feel like I have value. Carl Jung, who I turn to a lot when operating in this kind of mythic territory, this place between the rational and the mystical, he says, the highest and most decisive experience of all is to be alone with yourself, whatever one else chooses to call the objectivity of the psyche. A person must be alone if they are to find out what it is that supports them when they can no longer support themselves. Only this experience can give them an indestructible foundation. In a way, that feeling of loneliness that might come upon you when you want to, it would be called act out in addiction circles. It's only by moving through that we can develop a different type of strength. No judgment, because all of us have got to do what we have to do to survive, and all of us are making mistakes every day, and no one ever gets better from judgment alone, certainly not judgment without any kind of love and some solution or way out. But I know that personally, when I'm willing to go through stuff like longing, yearning, isolation, loneliness, if I do generally reach out for help from other people, and I usually feel bolstered by it. And I think that change, which is a very difficult thing to observe, like in the, you can't see your own hair grow type way, does come about as a result of making different decisions.
Alejandro Freixas is a managing editor of XBiz, a publisher of adult industry news.
There's been a pivot towards two things. I mean, that's authenticity and intimacy.
It's interesting, intimacy and authenticity, and I really recognise that from the feelings of longing that I would get. Intimacy and authenticity is what I'm looking for. So actually, I'm pretty bloody lucky that I'm married. And those of you that are alone, I suppose it's worth investigating in addition to whatever else you're doing to sustain yourself in what is clearly a really challenging and frightening and crazy time, looking at belonging to groups and organisations that more directly deal with that. I'm talking, of course, about support groups, groups that directly address mental health and addiction, and provide a space where you can actually say, this is who I am, this is how I feel, who are you, how do you feel, how are you coping with this? You need to have forums where you can directly have that engagement.
He says porn was changing even before COVID-19.
We crave realness, we crave connection, even from adult entertainment.
I'm sure that the rise in the use of porn and the emergence of OnlyFans are but two of myriad emergent phenomena that accompany these unique and peculiar social conditions that we find ourselves in. We are being directed increasingly more and more to unnatural behaviours as we live in unnatural conditions, not just as a result of the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns, but because we are being invited to live in atomised cells where we are stimulated continually into a state of inadequacy to facilitate purchase. I suppose this is another one of those videos where I want to say to you, it isn't your fault. There are things inside your head that are not you. There are things inside your head that have been put there. And I have no moral judgment on people's use of porn or no use of porn. But if what you're looking for is intimacy and authenticity, there are, in my opinion, other pathways to walk down to find those kind of connections.